really even before the outbreak started, consumption in Japan was pretty weak. We had, of course, a sales tax hike. So how much more detrimental will this virus outbreak be for the Japanese economy?
Yeah, thanks for having me, and good morning. Well, the private consumption slowdown, coupled with a weaker investment appetite and exports, will certainly drag GDP down for Japan for 2020. As a yardstick, the financial crisis in 2008 resulted in 9% negative growth in real GDP in first quarter of 2009. Considering the gravity of COVID-19, the impact could be larger. So the quarterly GDP, such as in second quarter, could potentially fall as much as by 10 to 20% per quarter. If the downturn of this magnitude continues for 2 consecutive quarters, we could see a 5 to 10% per annum drop in real GDP in 2020.
In the short term, though, could we see a temporary boost given that we are seeing some rush in order to get purchases ahead of a more severe lockdown of these cities and prefectures?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. In the short run, retail benefits from rush purchase. February retail was actually up by 1.7% year over year. This is due to consumers buying up staples from toilet paper to rice to prepare for the soft lockdown. And now that the state of emergency is announced, there will be a little bit more of the rush purchase. That performance varied by channel. Drugstores did well, followed by supermarkets and convenience stores. But it is devastating still for the department stores of the sort because they are the first to go from the consumer's mind. And over the long run, the negative impact on the retail sector will be significant.
I'm wondering how resilient you find Japanese retailers when it comes to their e-commerce, online commerce infrastructure, because that seems to be where you need to be able to ride out this crisis.
Right. The Japanese consumers' e-commerce penetration is actually lower compared to other nations, and this is due to the convenience of the physical stores and so forth. But that said, the retail stores and some consumer companies do have robust e-commerce infrastructure, and this pandemic quarantine would pivot a little bit of consumers' behaviors toward e-commerce for sure.
What about the idea of animal spirits? Because we know how hard it was for the BOJ, for the government, for broader Japanese society to climb out of that deflationary state of mind, right? How much of, a crushing effect psychologically does a crisis like this have on consumer sentiment?
Well, it is very hard to tell, but it is definitely very negative. The consumer sentiment was already weak before pandemic following the sales tax hike in October, and now it's almost frozen. So it is still very early, but the state of emergency could impact the GDP by 1% is the economist's estimate, which is about 5 trillion yen. And this is driven by the cooling down of the private consumption, which is about 60% of the GDP.
Could there be a silver lining here in that some parts of the Japanese economy will be forced to implement structural reforms?
Exactly. I think the silver lining might be there because a shock of this magnitude may inadvertently accelerate structural reform in Japanese industries, which is the elusive third arrow of Abenomics. Because of liquidity challenges, we may see a trend of consolidation in fragmented industries and restructuring of conglomerates. This would lead to industry rationalization and improved productivity and profitability. Deregulation will also accelerate, urged by the pandemic, for example, to allow for more online remote healthcare services. If such structural reform is kickstarted, unfortunately, by the pandemic, in the long run, Japan may emerge on the other side as a stronger, more modernized nation.